we'll have time to do that after this town hall session. So maybe wrap up your conversations and take a seat pretty soon. Thank you.
如果唔得，我就會做。嗰度咩？喂，係喎，係喎。Okay, I'm gonna start. I'm gonna this here. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right, let's start this. Welcome everyone to the synthesis document town hall session 1. It is at the end of a very exciting, very long, very fruitful, hopefully for all of you, day at the Asia Pacific Regional IGF in Singapore. This is really your time and your space to tell us, all of us, the entire community, what you've heard today, what is important to you, all the issues, all the discussions, all the hot topics and highlights that you really want us to remember to capture in this very important output document. This really is your time, so really take advantage of it. People in room in Singapore and also online. I want to make sure that everybody who has participated and is participating in APrIGF gets a chance to have their voice heard. Next slide. So a little bit about the synthesis document. Community members who've been with us for a few years probably already know this, but we have actually quite a few new members joining us, new family members, I think, after this whole APrIGF meeting. We can safely say we are a big APrIGF family. The synthesis document is one of the innovations of APrIGF. We started back in 2015, so quite a few years ago. This will be our 8th synthesis document. It really aims to capture and to reflect accurately all of the important discussions that we discuss here at this annual meeting. If you've heard me during day 0, I have explained, Asia Pacific is a very large region. We have so many issues, so many policy issues that concern us throughout our lives that have to do with internet governance. We're not trying to put all of these issues into one document. What we are trying to do is to capture all of the good discussions that we see and we hear and we talk about at this meeting. So we are looking really forward, very much forward to hearing from all of you. This innovation for this year will be quite special. It will serve as our input into the public consultations that are currently happening. Maybe if you've heard during the opening plenary from the Office of the Tech Envoy himself, Mr. Amandeep Singh, that they're having this public consultation from the UN Secretary General's Global Digital Compact. This will serve as our region's meetings input into this process. So this is another way for you to make your voice heard. I know in the morning we heard a little bit about, making sure we enable new and more diverse voices to be able to join the internet governance discussion. Next. I would like to introduce you to our 2 co-chairs who are sitting next to me right here. We have Yinshin Tan. She is the Stakeholder Engagement Manager for APEC from ICANN. She's also from Malaysia, and she is a new member of the drafting committee. One thing I really want to emphasize here is the membership of the drafting committee is still open. It is open to every person in the APRIGF community. It doesn't matter if it's your first APRIGF or your 13th APRIGF, we welcome you. Our second co-chair is Stella To, and she is from netmission.asia. She actually has participated in the youth IGF that just concluded yesterday, so she'll be bringing a lot of youth perspectives to the table. She's also part of ISOC Malaysia, so we welcome our two drafting committee co-chairs. One thing that's important about the drafting committee is that it's reconstituted every year. So every year we welcome returning DC members, but we also welcome new members. Next. And here to talk about the process is Yin-Chin. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jen. So, hi everyone, I'm Yin-Chin from ICANN. So I'll share a little bit on the process and timeline of the drafting committee and the synthesis document. So as Jen mentioned, the drafting committee is reconstituted every year. We're still open for membership. We're currently open for public input, so we have an online comment platform, which Stella here will share later, how you can input your comments directly on the platform. And then, of course, we're very excited to hear from you as well later during this town hall session and tomorrow on direct inputs here from what you heard throughout the day. So the drafting committee will be working collaboratively on drafting all your inputs into the synthesis document. And then, of course, after I'll share in a bit the timeline after the collaboration and drafting and the final synthesis document will be published. Next, please. So here's just the timeline of in detail. So currently we are at the town hall meetings. It's virtual and on-site, of course, yes. And then we are going to have the public input period open right until 18 September because we know that everyone will be busy as well during this meeting. So maybe you wouldn't have the time to directly input your comments. So we would open this until 18 September for all of you to provide your comments on the platform. And then from the end of September until the end of October, the drafting committee will be actively working on the draft. And at the end of October, draft 1 will be published and we will open it for public comments as well. And the public input period, the second public input period will open from end October to mid-November. This is when you can further comment on our draft 1 and provide more comments and more input. And the drafting committee will further actively work on the draft from mid to end November. And by end November, we will publish the synthesis document for 2022. And from here, I'll pass it on to Stella to share how you can share your comments on the platform.
Thank you, Yin-Chin. If I could have the next slide, please. Right, so the link to where you can do your public commenting on the APRIGF documents is shown on screen. And so the way you can do it is just to add comments, you'll need to input your name, your email, and website if you prefer, but it's optional. Your email address will not be shown, and later on you can also see your fellow participants' comments according to the paragraphs as it is. So this document, this webpage will be open for input throughout the forum as well as after, as mentioned by Yin-Chin. And this is where we hope to see all your inputs. We currently have 26 comments. Previously, at the end of the last APRIGF, we had 93. So we hope to be able to exceed that this year. And I'll pass it back to Jennifer for the rest on the 3 themes that we're looking at this year.
Next, please. So here you can see a diagram that maybe some of you have already seen before from last year. What we really want to show you is that the 3 very broad themes of inclusion, sustainability, and trust really overlap in many ways, especially in the workshops that you've been in the issues that you discuss. You can see that a lot of them do fall under more than one theme. We want to ensure that we're not just siloing issues under one particular theme, but we want you to think about it kind of cross-cutting in a multidisciplinary and a multi-sectoral way as well. A little bit about housekeeping rules for the town hall session. We will have 2 roaming mics that will be roaming around the room. You would be able to raise your hand. We'll be keeping the queue. When you are given the floor and given the mic, please remember to state your name clearly, your affiliation, and then please give us your comments. This can be anything under the 3 sub-themes. We will have some framing questions in the next slides, but really anything that you've heard today at the workshops that you think is extremely important to capture in a document, please do raise your hand. We'll put you in the queue and then we'll give you the mic. So next slide. I'm going to pass over to Yin Chin to start our, I think we have perhaps maybe like around 10 to 15 minutes for inclusion. So Yin Chin, please.
Yep. So I think basically Jen mentioned there's 3 themes, and we're going to start with inclusion. Just right before this session, we were listening to how we can include more people with disability. And I think throughout today, we also had a lot of sessions on including new entrants as well as gender equality. So I'm going to open it to the floor for inputs from you on maybe key inputs that you think that we should include in the synthesis document. So anyone here would like to start off? Everyone is still warming up. All right, yeah.
So Abdullah from Pakistan, for the record. I go through this document in the last episode at the end of the day session, the plenary for APrIGF. So I add the comment in it regarding the digital education because there is a common thing is you can say capacity building. So if talk about inclusion, so I think the thing is missing is when we talk about the disability of the person, we ignore the learning disabilities person. Like there is a disability of visual impaired, there's a disability of, you can say, physical disability. But there is another form of disability that is some people are struggling with the learning, like autism is a big spectrum, and ADHD and these. So I think so that should be including when we talk about the inclusion of these kind of kids, as well as those persons, they are struggling with the learning and learning difficulties as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. I think especially nowadays with more awareness on learning disabilities, that is definitely an important consideration. So we would appreciate if you could provide that comment onto our platform as well, because it's an essential one. Anyone else here would like to provide your input on any key highlights from today, perhaps, that you think was very important that we should include in our document, or maybe a new input as well? That would be great. Jenna is waiting to share her mic with someone from the audience.
Anyone from online participation?
Hi, my name is Crystal, and I am a member of the Digital Makers Asia Pacific, and I'm also an entrepreneur from Papua New Guinea. So I didn't attend some of the other sessions, but I do note there have been a lot of concerns around censorship on various online platforms, particularly Facebook and Twitter. So I think it's important to have a discussion around whether such platforms should have publishing rights as to whether they should decide which users to censor on their platforms or not. Because I think it's important to, as part of the conversation around inclusivity, it's important that everyone is open to sharing their ideas regardless of their political aisle. So I thought I'd just make a mention of that. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Yep, I think what you mentioned cuts across slightly to the trust track as well. So depending on, you could probably expand that as well, and then it could, cover both tracks as well. Yeah, next we have.
Yeah, my name is Farooq Faisal, and I'm the regional director for Article 19, based in Bangladesh. Today, this is the first day, of course. I haven't heard, we are talking about accessible internet, accessible online, but when the authoritarian government or the government which are not democratic, creating new laws that makes using internet dangerous for those people, how could we include that in this document? Like Bangladesh, Nepal, the countries are creating new laws. We already have a very bad law in Bangladesh, Digital Security Act. So that needs to be considered to make it more accessible. One is also give people courage to express themselves. That's my point.
Thank you. Yeah, so if you do have a question, it's actually okay to include your question in the synthesis document as well, because I think what you raised is a very important one, and it's been increasingly discussed as well throughout other economies, not just in South Asia, but also in the other sub-regions. So yes, please feel free to include your question as well in the synthesis document. Thank you for that. And Edmund, sorry, yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ellen Kusuma from Indonesia, APrIGF 2022 Fellows too. I would like to add about inclusion because we had this experience in Indonesia where actually the deaf communities doesn't really have vocabularies for internet things or internet terminologies. So I think it's also important to expose them to many things of internet because they are part of the internet user too, right? But they somehow doesn't really have this vocabulary in the sign language about, say, because I'm focusing on online gender-based violence, there is not much online gender-based violence sign language instructions that they can use or instruct. So what happened is when we reach them, they are trying to make a new signs. So the other deaf people in the communities can also learn about online gender-based violence. So I think it's also important to expose the terminologies or expose or enlarge the communities towards having these vocabularies. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that is actually an interesting point. Thank you for pointing that out because that is new to me as well, and I think it's really key. So yeah, thank you. And we have, yep.
Thank you. I'm Sarai Tewita from Samoa. Samoa IT Association as a representative and also from the National University of Samoa as an ICT director. I concur the points that make here in inclusion, but from the Pacific perspective, I'll take this from the Samoa perspective. It's a little emphasis on the inclusion of using this digital and the new digital technology. So I want to reflect in this document a more emphasis and more awareness of how we include the digital transformation we are living now in this document, so that, you know, to make it as a living document, not just something that we produce and leave it there, but make it as a living document that we can change it accordingly with the time and what we are moving on. So I just want to make a comment on that. Thank you.
Actually, that's a very interesting point. We do have this iteration every year, and in that sense, this document gets renewed every year in a different format. But we can definitely talk about this during the drafting committee's work, and we'll see how we can implement this good idea going forward as well. One thing I also wanted to note is since we've had the APrIGF in 2018 in Vanuatu, we've also had a special section, especially with accessibility in the Pacific Islands, in the small island developing states, and I think it's very important to include in the Asia Pacific document. And here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dhruv. When I was attending the session on the gender-based violence and collecting data, I also wanted to highlight that it's important that we continue to include gender non-conforming folks and non-binary folks in the conversation. And it's these things which go hand in hand. And I was very happy that that session, some of the speakers did mention that. And in any of the effort that we do as part of APrIGF, I hope that we continue to include gender non-conforming folks as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Drew, for that input. Yep, we agree with that as well. And Luke? Yeah.
Yep. Hi.
Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
This microphone? Oh, yeah, perfect. Kia ora. Look, I am from New Zealand. I'm on a panel tomorrow with some people that have just spoken before, and I come here in the capacity of representing the private sector, but in particular the Indigenous private sector. And the thing that I think, which we haven't talked enough about, is data sovereignty. It hasn't been a phrase that we've heard enough about today, personally. And particularly in New Zealand, a lot of Māori people are wanting to protect that data for their future generations so that it's not actually used for commercial purposes to benefit commercial entities, and that actually those Indigenous people, which we talk about in terms of inclusion, are not left behind. So I think that's one of the important things to try and mitigate this digital divide going forward. Thank you. Kia ora.
That's a really important point. I think in the previous slide, when we saw the 3 concentric circles, there's a lot of overlap in a lot of the themes. I think probably in the coming days, you'll probably hear more data sovereignty being talked about, and we do encourage you to input that on the comment platform as well.
Hi, my name is Luke from NetMission, and I was part of the organizing committee for YIGF. So I guess I'm going to talk about the youth and including the youth. So being a youth, it's like a double-edged sword. I mean, yeah, we've got lots of potential, but at the same time, we might not be taken too seriously. And coming from a language background, I like that in this setting, there are many experts from different backgrounds, not just IT or tech. And it inspires youth like me I come from a language background. So initially I didn't feel that in place because everyone's doing stuff related to it, and it's inspiring. And also talking about how to be diverse, I'm from Malaysia and we have people who speak different languages, and English may not be our first language. And most of the content on the internet is in English. So I would like to ask, how can people whose first language isn't English know more about internet governance? Because language is very contextual, and I think in this setting we use English a lot. So some people may not understand it. So how could we accurately translate this sort of materials to people whose first language may be something else like Malay, Mandarin, or Tamil? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That is an important consideration, definitely, because especially in APAC, we have such a diverse use of language throughout the entire Asia-Pacific region. So I think that is definitely an important consideration. And on your point about youth as well, youth participation and new voices coming into the internet governance from to our discussion is really important as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Lokendra from Bangalore, India. So I would like to partly address the first question you have posed there. And drawing from my personal experience of attending this event for the first time, participating in any internet governance initiative for the first time. So when I was registering for APRIGF and APNIC, I found it very difficult to understand the web portals you have put in. They are informative. There are many links. You have uploaded a lot of FAQs. But still, I found it more like a maze, like a puzzle to be solved. So maybe to make it more inclusive, I think some sort of simple document, just one simple document can be uploaded explaining what APRIGF is all about, what APNIC is all about, or whoever are involved in the organization of this conference. A good FAQ was there about registering, how to register, but nothing much was there on what APRIGF is actually all about. And I'm getting to know more about APRIGF after actually coming here. Not everyone may have the luxury or opportunity to actually travel here and then understand what this actually is about. I understand that APRIGF by its very nature is very complex because multi-stakeholder, multiple people are involved, multiple organizations are involved, and compiling such a document would be very challenging, but it is a task I think certainly worth taking up. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the great suggestion. We'll make sure that we make the information for the conference as well as the co-located conferences available in an accessible manner to all the newcomers. I think there have been fellows and youth fellows who've joined us who had the luxury of going through day 0, but we do have to also remember the newcomers who come straight to the conference and make sure they are also up to speed with what is going on. Thank you for your suggestion.
Ashirad from Nepal for the record. So I had this session on digital education today, and issue was raised by a fellow, but I don't see her here, so I'm speaking on her behalf. So when I was talking about digital education, she brought out the issues that she was from India, so especially in India and other countries, the internet shutdowns are very much increasing. And with part of world trying to, we're pushing internet and digital education together, but internet shutdowns exclude them from getting education. So she was kind of saying that maybe we also need to, talk about those things in this forum. So I just wanted to say on her behalf.
Yeah, in fact, that is a discussion that is, especially with the pandemic, because people had to join online, and then with the internet shutdown, it's really difficult for certain societies and communities. So that's thank you for raising that. And actually, we are a little short in time for this track. We will move on soon to trust, but we will take our last comments for inclusion, and before we move on to trust, last two comments for inclusion. Yeah. So do we?
It's me. Yeah. Okay. Hi, I'm Yuan. I'm from ID-APrIGF, Indonesia IGF. So actually, I'm trying to learn the whole process. And my question is, do you have any in the process? Do you have any way to measure your outcomes on this whole process? So that's actually a question on this. This is a synthesis, but then is there a way or a plan to get it to measure the outcomes of all of this?
So did you mean that basically, like, can we have a final output on the synthesis document, or is that
the impact, the outcome?
Yeah.
Anyone can help?
I guess the question is whether, we do all this, provide all this input and create the synthesis document. How does that impact the larger discourse?
So I'll take this. Since I think in the introduction I mentioned this is going to be our 8th publication of the document, once this one is published, we really hope to see, a bigger impact. We really hope that you can bring this document back to Indonesia, to your home country, to your home territories, and actually try to effect change. You'll have this document with you. You'll have the highlights that's discussed at the regional level, but perhaps it could probably resonate with your national discussions as well. It could be if you're able to have discussions with policymakers, if you're able to have discussions with various stakeholders in the different issue areas that you're concerned about. I think this is a conversation that we can take forward together. In other terms as well, this serves as input to the global IGF. So this is the Asia Pacific regional input into the global IGF. When we are coming together this year, it will be at IGF Ethiopia. But these issues, people from other regions can look at and learn from. And within our own region, the synthesis document actually has inspired different regional initiatives to start a very similar process. I believe Nepal IGF has their own synthesis document or own output document process. In different regions, such as Eurodig in the European region, they have messages that they have after each of their meetings. I think this is a really good way for us to look at best practices, to look at areas of where we can learn from each other. And this is kind of organic as well. So it's not really a document that will say, this is what's going to happen. These are the things that, certain organizations will do. It's not a pledge document, but hopefully this document can inspire the conversations that will lead to policy change, that will lead to regulation change, that will lead to a lot more good things to happen to the internet community as a whole. Hopefully this answers your question. Yeah.
So hello everyone, I am Amasha from Sri Lanka. I participate for YIGF program. So in my point in inclusion, just I have experience in creating some inclusion guidelines as we are in the process in creating guidelines in Sri Lanka. So just in my point, I think that we should add the guidelines and we should give this inclusion targeting the youth, the women's and also disabled, our different able persons as blind and deaf persons. Also, I just like would write, as we have that topic mentioned in the women harassment and those things, I shouldn't be, we should target the senior citizens also in the world. It will be most important in this inclusion point. That's it, a suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your input. You cut across a few of the main themes that we were discussing throughout the day as well. So we'd appreciate if you put that input as well in our platform. And we will take one last comment on inclusion and we'll move on. Yes, Winston. Yes.
Thank you. I'd just like to go back and comment on one or two of the other people, observations I've heard from people who are asking for some background and some explanations. It does occur to me that much of the conversation in this conference is, not all of it, but much of it is the initiates talking to each other. And it is true that it's a complicated process. I mean, I've been involved in it for 20 odd years because I was at the World Summit in 2005 when it started. And I know that the whole process of internet governance through the forums and so on has gone zigzagging along and developed all sorts of themes and sub-themes and offshoots, and then the NRIs were developed and all the NRIs developed their own variations and so on. It's a very, very complicated process. We can't expect all the newer people to understand it immediately. To some extent, you could say that they need to do their homework and read all the previous reports, but I mean, that's unfair too. You can't expect them to read all the previous reports. What we need to do, those of us who are more engaged, what we need to do, I think, is make it easy for everyone and develop some sort of introductory explanation manual, guide to internet governance for newcomers and publish it. But who's going to write that? We need maybe to commission somebody to write it, somebody who knows some of the background from years ago and who can synthesize all that before we start, you know, a synthesis is what we're talking about in this session, but I mean a synthesis of the whole history of internet governance that explains the context, that explains the political context, the multi-stakeholder context. And there we are missing the government input into the conversation too. We need to get more government input. This is mainly civil society organizations talking to each other, I think. But we need to make it easy for the new people. Otherwise, we will have people endlessly asking questions about things to which the answers are available if you only knew how to find them, you know? So I'm thinking let's continue with the synthesis document because we have to do that. It's important. It goes up to the UN. But on the other hand, we need to go back a little bit and maybe do a sort of meta synthesis of all the synthesis documents that we have produced in the last 5 years or 6 or 7 years, and maybe do that for the AP region. Not a global thing, that would be too much. Maybe get Geneva to do a global one, but do a synthesis of all our reports for the AP region, highlighting the main themes, which countries are interested, concerned by the themes, give some perspective from civil society, from government, from business. Make it a sort of comprehensive introduction. Okay, I've said enough.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. And I think it will complement really well with the earlier suggestion on just, introduction to APrIGF and then collate it with the past reports like a summary. I think that would be really good for newcomers. I would definitely seek for your input instead. Yeah. So with that, we'll move on to the next track on trust, and I'll pass it to Stella for this track. Yeah.
Right, thank you, Yanjin. So great to see everyone's got input on the first theme of inclusion. So moving on to trust. So Yanjin did note that some of the earlier questions may be more directly related under this theme. And I'd like to also mention, just as a starter for everyone, from the Youth IGF, we did talk a lot about trust in the fact that we as youths do want to use this as a platform to have our voice heard, and that we do hope to see mentorship and see mentors willing and able to, for example, highlight or lead the way for us, especially when we're coming into it from different backgrounds. So yes, I'd like to open up the floor to everyone. Any questions or inputs on what we have currently in our synthesis documents that you believe is related to the theme of trust?
When you talk about first of all, Abdullah, for the record, when you talk about the trust, so I would like to talk about the misinformation, disinformation on social media. For this purpose, I think the phenomena of digital, the phenomena of citizen journalism, that is some countries working on it, and some people are, and some NGOs and INGOs working on it. So the citizenship and the training and capacity building on citizen journalism is, I think, so a key for this era. Because when you talk about a citizen journalist that have access with some certain ethical background, because when we have some ethics and you have as a citizen, you have some trainings and capacity building on it, then I think so that will a good impact on it. Because as I am from Pakistan, and most of you recently know about, there's a very massive disaster in flood disaster, and number of response by the government done through the report that are coming from the social media, from the local reporter. So there is a region Sabat, so there are some certain reporter I know personally, they don't have any good you can say resources access, but they are connected to the internet and they have a background of reporting, so that will generate a very good impact. So lastly, summarize, I thought there should be a portion of citizen journalism.
Right, thank you for your input on citizen journalism. And yes, we'll take note of that, as well as the fact that in this era of misinformation and disinformation, I'd also like to highlight the concept of cyber utopianism, which is the belief that, for example, access to internet and active participation in it is better for reaching and achieving democracy. So yes, next.
Hi, this is Tonka from Nepal. Regarding the trust, nowadays the use of internet and the social media and the online news content are being accessed by the wider community, but the trust is getting down and down. If somebody refer to the site of the social media or any sort of like online medium, people start saying that, oh, it is only on social media or the online medium, it is not trustworthy. Why it is? Because people are using totally spread the misinformation and disinformation, and some of the example has deteriorated the value and the trust of the news or content floating in this online medium. So for that, it is quite related with the election, how this misinformation and disinformation is really trying to change the result of the election. There is a session day before, after, coming day before, next day. So in that case, my belief is that, and our focus should, put on how this, fact-checking initiative can be expanded. Similarly, what sort of legal or regulatory mechanism can really help to minimize the misinformation, disinformation? And the third one is, as gentlemen already shared about the, sensitizing or digital literacy among the user. Until and unless people are not aware about this sort of content and the mistrust or distrust over the content posted in the internet, so that will continue and they will expand it in a way that the trust will getting down and down. So these are the three major areas we should pay attention to our this forum and the in the days coming through the different regional or the country-based event and the initiative. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'd also like to highlight in a previous session that there was mention from a speaker about the fact-checking partnerships they have in Indonesia, as well as the emphasis on digital literacy as a long-term solution that they believe would be the best way to approach misinformation and disinformation. Thank you. Yes, next.
Okay, I'm Sandri from Indonesia, and I think we need to add about the ethical process of algorithm. and also how the business process need to being ethicals in this kind to bringing more trusted process in internets. And also the other one is about the artificial intelligence governance and ethical process that we need to also thinking about, because to bringing the more trusted place for everyone, we need to also making sure that there is no black box that really happens in the platforms from algorithm and also in other technology that being used. So this kind of condition need to be assessed and need to be addressed to making sure that there are a trust process and business process in each of us using the internet. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. Next.
Yeah, shall I address what I want to say? Yes, regarding the potential solutions, people have been talking about like misinformation, disinformation, fact-checking came up. I want to in addition to that, I want to mention that there is the role of all of us who are present here, representing ourselves as fellows, as civil society organizations, tech experts, and communicators, journalists, etc. We all do have responsible act to play as a news producer, as a communicator, and as a receiver, as audience, as reader. So there are both party responsibilities that I want to mention to include, because it's not a blame game. There are lots of web portals, news portals that are politicized. I'm sure it does exist everywhere, anywhere in the world it could exist. But the mechanism, if we go for developing that mechanism to make sure that me as a reader, or me as a journalist defender, or me as a journalist, or a tech expert, I know what is my role to play. So that is one thing I'd like to incorporate along with aligning with the trust. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Roomki Farhan. I'm representing Article 19, South Asia Regional Office based in Dhaka.
Thank you very much for your comment. I'd also like to highlight that as part of the YIGF discussion, a group did mention in their youth policy statement that they do believe that digital citizenship is when digital literacy is the soil combined with responsibility online, which is what they aim to achieve. So yes, I'd like to highlight that our youth did discuss that as well. Next.
Haruk again, I have only one line about misinformation, disinformation. When the government itself gets involved in spreading disinformation, misinformation, and for their own benefit, it's very dangerous, and that should be highlighted as well.
Hello, Santosh Sikdal for the record. So quick comment on how about the regulation of data that is collected through the contact tracing and other during the pandemic. I think we have to mention in, somewhere in the synthesis document that how the right-based approach to data is necessary, and how the countries in Asia Pacific region should consider about having a comprehensive data protection laws, because many of the countries do not have the comprehensive data protection laws. So that is one thing. Another is about the defamation, this disinformation and misinformation. I think regulation of disinformation and misinformation is double-edged sword. In many of the countries, this regulation has been again used against the freedom of expression, against the human rights defenders and the civil society organizations. So we have to be very careful when asking for the regulation of the defamation or misinformation or disinformation. So the balance should be there, and always the rules should be the right-based approach and the protection of the fundamental rights or the rights ensured by the international instrument, and only the exception should be the regulation of the information. And the government should never be the tasked with authorizing which information is disinformation or not. If the government has that authority, then they will start categorizing information as per their interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. Yes, I'd also like to comment on what you mentioned about comprehensive data protection laws. I do believe that I did not hear this mentioned in the conversation, but with the call for stronger legislation in terms of regarding data governance, I do question whether or not we'd be forced to follow the footsteps of our perhaps considered area leaders like Europe and then end up adopting more of what they've already put into place. And would that really reflect our own context in Asia, which has a lot of cultural differences as compared to European and Western contexts? So yes,
Just a note, there is 5 persons in the queue. Please, yeah, the last speaker, and then please come, for those, please come and line up because we won't be able to remember all of it. So who's the next, please, and the next.
With regard to the second question,
Maybe your name?
Mong from the Philippines, I'm sorry. The role of disinformation, not just in influencing election outcome and also undermining democracies. That's important to note. Second, greater accountability for authorities who are regulating misinformation, but also the biggest source of disinformation, especially during the pandemic and during election events. A third, not just potential solutions, but also we need to review false solutions enforced during the pandemic in the past 2 years. As mentioned earlier, these solutions, instead of addressing this information, they were used to silence dissent and tag or categorize dissent as disinformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for input. I'll pass to the next.
Hi, this is Bea from YIGF Organizing Committee. So for our first day, actually, we discussed on the topic of emerging technologies and growing up with metaverse and NFTs. We discussed about digital citizenship and the use of avatars on metaverse, and how will the metaverse affect the youth's perception of self-identity, for example, body image concerns or people in the LGBTQ community. It would be a great place for self-expression, freedom, and creativity, but for our young metaverse users can be vulnerable with metaverse mimicking and cyberbullying. And relating it back to digital citizenship, teaching digital citizenship helps ensure that the youth are successfully practicing both respect and responsibility for themselves and others in a virtual environment. And I think that does not only go for the youth, but of course, for those who, all end users of the internet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bea, for your input. I'll pass it to the next.
Yeah, I'm Sarah Park from South Korea, and I'm fellow APRIGF. One of the typical way to deal with disinformation and so-called fake news is fact-checking. After the fake news is generated, the fact-checking checks if the news is true or not. But the real problem is this is too slow. Yeah. When if the fake news is generated and spreaded in 1 second, so therefore when the public encounters news, it is necessary to have a habit.
All right, for the interest of time and also for the interest of us, we shall end the session right now. So that marks the end of our day 1. And thank you so much for being here physically and also for those of you online. Thank you so much. So come join us tomorrow for an even more filled day as we facilitate sessions on businesses and human rights and technology. So with that, we'd like to conclude today's. Thank you so much for coming once again. Have a great evening.